morning. Today, we are talking to the wonderful Yuval about her multi-hyphenate career, international practice, and actor training. But before we kick off, if you've not been to any of these before, we're Flood. We do coffee mornings every other week with different artists from across the sector, so you can find out all the amazing career paths that exist in our industry. We also offer free one-to-ones every other Thursday where you can come along and chat to us about any creative problem solving you need, anything you'd like to discuss, and your career as well. But without further ado, Yuval, before you properly introduce yourself, I'm going to ask you the first question that we ask everyone, and we've had the
Mhm.
wildest answers. And it is, what was the first paid role you had in the arts?
I do believe it was some voice acting when I was like 12.
I love that. Do you remember what it was for?
Gosh, it was like the dub version of like I want to say like either Bridge to Terabithia or like Berenstain Bears, like something like that.
Oh my goodness. Bridge to Terabithia, I think, ruined my childhood. The end of that film.
I I never actually watched that film. I was just doing the voiceover, like the dubbed version of it at least.
Amazing. Well, it's a very sad at the end. Also, if you can hear
That I
barking,
do
we have our
hear, that
dog
I
with us
do know.
today.
I've heard the rumors. That's part of why I never watched it even later on.
I think you made the right choice.
That's
Well,
good.
after your voice acting, what did you go on to do? Could you talk us through your sort of career journey so far?
Sure, I can do my best. There is a lot of ups and downs in there. Um, so I started off doing community radio for like 8 years since I was eight, and then that kind of led me into voice acting, which then led me into acting. But it's always kind of like fun and casual until my 20s, and then I went to uni. I studied uh, theater writing, directing, and performance, as we love to call it. And then the pandemic hit. And during that time, during my BA days, I kind of toyed with doing lights and sound as well. So I initially trained as an actor. Then I was like, no, 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 I need more control. I'm going to be a director. And I decided that as a director, I'd like to know more about lights and sound, and it's very important to me. And I ended up just learning how to do that. Again, not to the degree of people who chose that as their path, but enough to be able to do it if needed. And then the pandemic hit. Are we allowed to say the P word? Is it the cool? So then the pandemic hit, and I was kind of like question mark because obviously I will say obviously I'm not a UK native, not with this accent. Um, so I didn't really know what to do because I was finishing my BA and I didn't feel like my journey here was over. So I ended up going and taking the next step in the journey, which I decided that not only did I want to direct, it was very important to me to have the right tools to interact with people. As I've seen enough directors just kind of like deductively or very prescriptively tell people what to do rather than direct them in the direction of where the production was heading or feeding them a vision that they can actually realize themselves without being told one-to-one what to do. So I went and did an MFA in actor directing and coaching, which is a more pedagogical teaching like approach. Um, During that time, I started teaching in places, as well as doing productions as a sound and lighting designer, just because I had the skills and the skills were in demand. So I got to keep honing those skills and getting paid for it, which is an exciting prospect for all, I think. And yeah, now I'm just out here juggling everything, directing, performing, lights, sound. I do bar mitzvahs, funerals, like whatever. Stage management. I also started doing stage management. Everything. No, I don't do sound, and no, I do sound. I don't do set or costume. That is that's out of scope, and that's okay. We can't do it all.
Wow. I think you pretty much do most, though, rather than doing it all, you do a lot, which is
I
So interesting because I think you're probably one of the most multi-hyphenate career people we've had on one of these
we call it
calls.
multidisciplinary in the biz.
There we go.
Multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, however you want to present it, depending on the day, how I wake up, if it's the left side or the right side.
I love that. In because we were recently in America, they don't
Mhm.
really have multidisciplinary. They say multi-hyphenate because to multidisciplinary is like theatre and visual art, I think,
Yeah.
from my understanding. So I found it really interesting how it translates. And have you found sort of in your career, because you do so much, that when you've gone into different projects, you've ended up sort of kind of going in for role and then realizing that actually they needed someone to do something slightly different because you do so much, you've ended up doing more than you thought you would.
Yeah. I mean, when it's my project, I end up doing way too much and I need to learn to delegate. Do not do everything on your own projects. That is not good for anybody. Um, but on other projects, I did end up kind of like, you come in, they say, oh, you're just pressing the button for an already existing file. And then you end up pressing the button and then being asked to change some things in the queues. And then it's like, oh, can you help set up the thing? Because it requires this and that. And then you come in and the set is a bit broken. So you go up the ladder and you put it back in place. And it kind of becomes a whole thing just because I have the skill set for it. And I'm not going to kind of, that's not true. I was gonna say that I'm not going to hold back um, from people if I have the skills to help them, but I've learned in my journey that sometimes you need to do what you get paid to do, and extending beyond that is on a case to case basis, just for a
Absolutely.
minute. Yeah.
I think that's such a good piece of advice, especially for people who are just starting out and maybe do have those multiple skills, because it can be so easy. Because as well, I think a lot of people in our industry are so generous and do want to help to make the show as good as it can be, end up stretching themselves far too thin and taking on all of their roles on one project where maybe they should have kind of split those roles across projects to really focus on honing them in. And I think it was really great what you mentioned about sort of being able to use your technical skills and hone those more just after the pandemic, which I think we can talk about now because like it's nearly 5 years ago since 2020, which is I know it feels so present
So
still.
long, so long,
I
so
know.
short.
Exactly. And we did have in the industry a real technical skills shortage. And because because I've known you a long time now, and I don't, did you actually want to go into more technical roles, or was it more that's where the work was at that point? So you ended up honing them more?
It was a combination. I initially started doing sound and lights because I saw it as essential to me as a director, but then I was like, I kind of enjoy doing it, and people need somebody to do it, so it might as well be me. Unless you have training, and then you are so valid for your training in those things, and I'm not trying to take your jobs. Usually, people come to me with those jobs because, like, yeah, it's an interesting one, but I do gain skills as I go, which is always fun. So.
Absolutely. And I think that's something we've heard across a lot of these coffee mornings. And if you have missed any, they are all on the YouTube channels. You can go back and watch them as well. And lots of people in all different disciplines. So we spoke to Rebecca Pitt, who's a poster designer, and she mentioned constantly looking at evolving and honing her skills across different visual arts mediums. And we spoke to Nathan Powell, who's just taken over at theatre in Liverpool, and he did so much in his early career that again he felt really honed his directing. And I think it's really great that you kind of pinpointed that because that's where you wanted to be, you felt you really needed to understand all the roles around you to be able to do that job well. And do you think that's given you a different sort of methodology and perspective when you go into a room as a director and sort of like as an actor trainer as well and you're teaching on how that kind of plays into those disciplines?
100%. I usually work in devising spaces. I do love me a good written script, but that's just where I ended up being. And especially in those spaces, on the one hand, at least in my practice, I try to give my designers and my devisers so much space because they're on this project because I want their input. And on the other hand, I want a tool to communicate to them the vision that I have for the project and kind of like what the capacities are, what I'm hoping for in certain places, like the places where details are important. I want the tools to be able to communicate to them so they then are able to go and do their thing with us actually sharing a vision. So I find that super helpful when it comes to communicating to other people on the team, really getting the vision across, and just in general, having the language and understanding of how things works allows me, both as a director and producer whenever I have to be, to plan ahead and to make sure that I have everything in place by the time I need it in place in order to get shows going as smoothly as possible. It's been really helpful with that.
Amazing. And I think jumping back to your training, because you did, similar to Emily, who we had on a while back now, a sort of standard degree at a traditional university. And then you went to drama school to do an MFA. And I think your MFA was really specific in a way that maybe some people haven't heard of. So it'd be great if anyone's watching and considering doing a master's to get kind of your take on what it is you kind of learned on that course that was very different to your BA, and how you think doing both has kind of benefited you or not, as it might be.
So yes, no, yes, very interesting question. BA was a very broad one. So again, theater, writing, directing, and performance. And in there, we kind of got opportunities to do light, sound as well, some performance. Like it was very broad, and I was lucky enough to be able to kind of go places and seek, in addition to the thing, external experiences to kind of really broaden my horizons and clarify things for me. But it was not as heavy on the performance and acting side just because we were doing so many things. So then I moved to, yes, it was a drama school. It is a drama school. It was an MFA in actor training and coaching, which is very niche and specific. And it gave me insight into more acting methods, a bit more, specialized, a bit more drama schooly-ish acting methods. In that specific course, you also get pedagogy. You also get research skills that are a bit more robust than you would get on a BA. And I personally also did like 100-page dissertation about fencing because that was my personal interest. So I'd say that the benefit of the having the master's degree, first of all, is that I can now teach in higher education, which is harder to do if you don't have that qualification. You have to have a lot of background experience. And that it gave me a lot of those methods and practitioners that I didn't know about beforehand or that I wasn't as familiar with. And I got that training in person as much as possible during the heydays of the pandemic. And it also gave me an opportunity to develop my own teaching practice and my own directing practice, because that's part of why I went there in the first place. Just having that space, having the people in the room to interact with, who were already trained actors, and who were very, on the one hand, receptive, but on the other hand, able to tell me, oh, actually, I think that if someone is not as well versed in this, they would struggle. They were also very good at pinpointing where the scaffolding was a bit weak or not as robust as it could be. So that's the benefit that I found in my specific MFA training.
Amazing. And I think that's all really important because I did both as well. And I think an MA or an MFA is definitely a great place to specialize. And I think if you have a BA that's given you a really good grounding in kind of the career or the subject you want to pursue, I think you really need like clear goals for why you're then going again into further education. I think you've kind of summed it up really robustly in terms of getting those methodologies in, being able to test things on students or on trained actors that you really wanted to practice in the real world in kind of a safer environment that wasn't part of the course you did before. I think that's really helpful to kind of have that time to evaluate why you might want to go and do that further training and what it is you want to specialize in. And I think it's actually quite good that the course was so niche because you'd already done a really broad course. So it's really different kind of to what you'd come from as well, which I think is really helpful.
100%. And it's so niche, and I went for it because it's so niche. I went for the BA because it was so broad, and then went for so niche because sometimes what you need only manifests after you know what you don't need.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you do so much in kind of your day-to-day work and it varies a lot. But would you say there are any key skills that really you use across every role in your kind of day-to-day work life that people watching this who might be interested in sort of doing a very multidisciplinary career or having that portfolio career could really look at honing and sort of highlight when they're looking for things to kind of work on in their own practice?
Yes, absolutely. There are two things that I would say you need across all of those. One is people skills. You need to know how to communicate with people. And that also comes with, so you have the people skills and then you have the time management skills, because you can't really have people skills if you don't know how to manage your time, both energy wise and literally where you are at one point of the day. Um, so with people skills, I'd say if you don't know about non-violent communication, do look it up. Very good for life in general, just a general life skill with people. But also knowing how to kind of negotiate while making it clear that, like, I'm not hating on you, I just need this for myself. And then with the time management, I find that very personal. I know that time management for me has been a journey all on its own. But do try and find what method works for you, because once that clicks, that's a very big thing for a freelancer in general, and then a multi-hyphenate, multidisciplinary, however you want to call it. That's doubly true if you're running all over the place doing like three different things. Like I'm not gonna lie, I'm not sure what my schedule is for the next 3 days, and I might be doing five different things. So I that's what I'm gonna do after this. I'm gonna time manage myself.
Nice. And it sounds like with that time management, there's a lot of kind of planning that goes into that and being able to have that forward look at kind of, I know I'm doing this on this day, so I'm going to take some time on this day to do something else and kind of really plot that around. And would you say that kind of that's very true of what how you manage your time, or is it kind of more organic that you kind of slot everything
Oh,
in and it works?
it is absolutely not organic. It is a lot of hard work. So much of my time goes into managing my own time. Like, I'm just sitting around here with like 100 different like timekeeping methods. I've got lists as well. It's all here all the time, because otherwise, if I don't see it, it's not happening. But I'd also, this is the important bit where we go, and also schedule time off, because
Yeah.
we work evenings, because we work weekends, because we do two jobs in the same day, and we forget that somewhere in there there needs to be three meals and a nap and just life. So that's also part of why it's not organic at all. You can't count on things happening. You need to make them happen, and you need to schedule them happening in order for them to happen. So that's why all those different timekeeping methods for on the go, and when you're home, and when you're in a different country. I don't know.
I love that. No, that is so important because I think it can be so easy when you look at kind of like your calendar just to plan in when you're working and not sort of putting in those like when you're going to go on holiday, like when you're going to take some time off, or even like life things like when am I going to go to the post office? They can kind of fall by the wayside. I know when I started freelancing, when I was doing my MA, I was kind of doing the MA in the day, freelancing in the evening, and then freelancing a bit before the course. And it kind of got about 6 months in, and I was like, I don't think I've actually had a day off like for 6 months. And it was one of those realizations where I was like, oh yeah, I have to kind of say to people, oh yeah, I can't work that day because that's my day off, and that to realize that that's okay. So I think as a freelancer, you can kind of get this impression that everyone is working on everything all the time and feel a little bit left out in a way if you're not. And I think that's one of those weird myths of being a freelancer in the industry that you kind of have to work it out on your own that it's actually not true, because if you look at everything from the outside, it does look very true and it can be for some people, but it shouldn't have to be for everyone. Are there any other kind of like conceptions or preconceptions you had of freelancing, especially across all the different roles you have, that have turned out either to be true or to not be true?
Hmm. Um, hmm. I don't know if it's a misconception, a conception, but something that I don't know if I wasn't expecting it or I was hoping that it wouldn't be true, but you're constantly on the hunt. You're constantly looking for the next thing, which again takes time and energy. And I'd argue that for me personally, unfortunately, I wish it was, the search is not as fulfilling as the thing itself. Um, so that's something that I don't know, maybe I just was suppressing the thought of it when I was like, I want to be a freelancer in the arts. Um, and yeah, and now it's just kind of like, you gotta do it. You gotta do it. It's no choices. You gotta do it, and you gotta find your anchors, and you gotta manage your schedule, and you gotta decide what you're prioritizing at the moment. So I know right now I have two projects going on at the same time, which means that I can't like it's two like more actory projects. Uh, so that means that right now I can't go and do a production where I'm doing sound or lights because those productions would require me to then do 3 weeks somewhere. And I can't do that right now. I'm in rehearsals here. I can't go somewhere for 3 weeks and miss those rehearsals. So a lot of time management. It comes back to time management and people skills, I do think.
No, I think that's definitely true because I think a lot of times when you're looking at freelancers, you're looking at people who are going from, oh, they're working on this tour or then they're going to this show, and you don't really think about the kind of in between time. And I think it is a real skill to be a freelancer in itself because, as you say, you are constantly looking for work, and sometimes you're very lucky and work comes to you, but there is always still that element of kind of looking at what's out there and seeing what you could do. And that doesn't suit everyone. That's okay. But I think you need to be more aware of it when you kind of come into the industry that you do have to kind of put that time into searching for freelance gigs, especially at the start of your career. And it can take actually more time than the work itself sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
which feels, I think it can feel quite like off-putting in a way, but it's definitely rewarding if it's the work that you want to do. And that really leads us nicely onto one of the questions we do kind of try to ask everyone, which is, what are your biggest tips for finding freelance work for someone just starting out?
It's networking. It's networking. Like you can go on all those websites and you can have all those subscriptions, and at the day's end, somebody you know is gonna knock down your door and be like, somebody canceled on me last minute. Can you do this for me? Like that's the and the thing is, I'm gonna say it. I don't think that's nepotism. I think that that's like again, I wouldn't say that in every case it's not nepotism, but I know that a lot of the times when people come to me, they're either seeking my specific expertise or somebody else that they kind of already agreed on with last minute pulled out and they need someone who is reliable. So usually it comes down to your expertise and your reliability and knowing people who are in the industry, which is something that I think we all kind of strive for or should be striving for. Although should is a very contested word if should we be shooting ourselves. But that's a mental health thing. Anyway, um, yes, so networking, socializing, being a good people's person, being reliable and having a very clear expertise.
That's great. I think networking is something you kind of touched on it a little bit with kind of the nepotism comment, that it can kind of feel like a bit of a dirty word at some point because I think networking kind of has this whole mystique almost around it. It's like, well, how do I network? Like, I don't know anyone. So, how would I network without knowing people? And realistically, you're kind of already in a network. Like, the people you see day to day can be your network. They might be your friends as well, but they might also be your network if you have similar career goals. Like, if you're doing a degree, your course mates are your initial network. If
Mhm.
you're doing AmDram, your fellow AmDram people are your network. And I know from my perspective, I did loads of AmDram before I went to uni. And now, like, five of us, I think, from my Amdram group at home are all working in theatre and worked in London. And it's one of those really odd moments where it's like, I was friends with you when I was like 10 and we did probably really terrible performances of like Sweeney Todd, but now we're all working in theatre professionally. And it's really nice to see how people that you've kind of developed with and you've shaped your skills with kind of come up with you. And for me, networking isn't about I'm going to go knock on Cameron McIntosh's door and ask him for a coffee.
Mm.
Probably say no. But it's about the people that you meet going to shows, in workshops you do, online that you connect with in your degree that are all kind of coming up with you, I think. And I think that's where those connections come from. And
For
if you
sure.
don't know anyone and you're just coming in, I think my biggest thing would be go to things like go to talks, go to Q&As, and really try and put yourself out there because it can be really kind of anxiety inducing. But luckily, most everyone I've spoken to or reached out to has been really generous. Have you kind of found the same?
Yes, absolutely. And it's about, I mean, I think there are like specific events as well, and there are like a lot of, smaller fringe theaters. They specifically look to cultivate that kind of community. So your local theater might have something going on. Who knows? That's how they get their funding. They do something for the community. So look for those, look for larger events, um, look for people you admire and do the coffee thing. You can do the coffee thing. I say that I'm being a hypocrite. I'm so scared of the coffee thing, but I have done the coffee thing and I've had people come to me for the coffee thing. And I know that when people come to me for the coffee thing, I'm like, of course we're gonna have a coffee. Of course I'm gonna try and help you as much as I can because like why not? It's just a good time. Like it's people. I
Absolutely.
think we do this because we like people at the day's end.
Definitely. And this comes back to something that Beck said when she was on with us, which was don't make it a competition, try and join in. And I think that's really lovely because our industry can seem at times quite competitive and a little bit cutthroat. And I don't think it needs to be because everyone has, even if you're working in the same role, no one's going to do the same job in the same way. And everyone has their own special niches and interests and things that make their practice different from everyone else. And there's definitely place for everyone and those skills in loads of different roles. So I think definitely join in rather than think of it as a competition. And that will probably help you make connections too.
100%.
So, out of all the disciplines you work across, do you have a favorite?
Oh gosh, that's so rough. It really fluctuates with the mood I'm in. Like we just had Brat Summer, so it was very all over the place. I was doing a lot of just I was doing everything. But now it's definitely getting to Hermit Girl Autumn for me. So funnily enough, I end up doing more acting right now. I would expect that I'd like to be in like some tech box somewhere, not speaking to anybody ever again. But it ended up maybe because it's Hermit Girl Autumn for me. Then when I do go out, it's like it's properly going out and speaking and devising and doing all the immediately I go into movement devising and doing all those things to counteract the fact that in my private time I'm a bit more sleepy right now. So right now, it's performing. Right now,
Nice.
right now.
I like that. I think that's one of the benefits really, isn't it, of kind of having a multidisciplinary career is that you can focus on what you're interested in the moment. You're not
Mhm.
tied necessarily to anything. Could you kind of give us a bit of a rundown in a way of the things that are really positive about what you do and what you enjoy about the kind of career you have? Because I think you can kind of focus on the bits that are really tricky, like how to find work, having to manage your time, having to kind of like be here, there, and everywhere, and it can be quite hectic. And I think sometimes people can look at it from the outside and be like, why would anyone want to do that with their life? Or be put off starting it themselves because they see online how difficult people are finding it. They hear people talk about how they're really struggling to kind of like manage the time and things like that. So it'd be great to kind of hear from your perspective why you do it and kind of what the key benefits to you of working in this way actually are.
For sure. So I personally am a kind of individual who likes jumping around between things. Like I know that when I sit down and do one project for a really long time, I start not necessarily resenting the project, maybe resenting myself for tying myself for something that is so long running, which is not good for my financial stability. That I'm like long projects, oof. But I having this multidisciplinary skill set does allow me to kind of take on shorter projects and try and jump between them whenever the schedule and places that are throwing work at me allow for that. I also like that I get to connect with different communities of people. I like that wherever I go, it's like a different pool of people, and I have a specific role with them. So here I'm a lighting designer, here I'm a stage manager, here I'm a performer. And I like being able to have different parts of myself reflected to me in the people I interact with. It makes me feel more whole as a person, I guess, just having those different interactions in different spaces. It also really helps with the networking thing. Although it's really hard to explain. I've had people ask me, like, what do you do the past couple of days? And I was like, everything, everything except set and cost. So yes, it's that interaction and it's that ability for me to not be stuck doing just the one thing. Um, and it also means that I get to explore different worlds at the same time, content wise. So both with the people I'm with, but also critically engaging with different shows. Again, for my personal brain, it really helps that I'm jumping through those things. And then I can kind of also do crossovers. I can be like, ooh, that actually works really well for that, and this for that. Um, yeah, and also means that again with the people, if there is someone whose work I really like, either I kind of like put their name down if I ever need them for a project, or if another person needs recommendation for their role. But I'm big on asking people to teach me things. So if I see someone whose practice I'm really into, I'm like, so like, how do you do it? What's the thought process? What's the practical process of like, that's how I learned all my teching skills. I go to people and be like, teach me. So jumping around means more teaching.
I love that. And I think that's so great because that's kind of why we started doing things like this and our open office hours because sometimes you just don't know. Like, I remember when before I went to uni, searching on Indeed for like theatre jobs and
Mhm.
being really confused when I was getting loads of hospital, like operating theatre roles and kind of not really knowing where to look because at secondary school, when you kind of have that careers talk, so like look on Indeed, send your CV to local businesses. No one tells you arts jobs exist. And
Mhm.
that's where all the arts jobs are listed. Like, it's kind of one of those weird, not secrets because it's not taught. And unless you're lucky enough to find it on your own, until someone says, have you looked on arts jobs? You're kind of there like, where do I find work? And people, I think, look at freelancers and technicians and poster designers and go, well, that's great. I'd love to do that. I have no idea how. There's no clear sort of route into it. So maybe they just got lucky and then they don't necessarily explore those options for themselves. So I think constantly learning and asking people to teach you things is such a great skill to have because again with the networking, I think that can be quite daunting asking someone for something, but we're kind of being wanting to learn, that might be a nicer way kind of
Mhm.
in to kind of get someone to help you with something rather than being like, oh, I would like to work with you in that sort of sense.
And it can 100% be like, oh, can you show me the one thing? And then that one thing becomes another thing and another thing. And it doesn't always have to be a one-way like situation where they teach you. If you have knowledge, if you have something to give them, for sure, go for it. Like it's about building a relationship, and that can start from literally, oh, how did you do that? That one little trick.
Absolutely. And it's so key what you just said there about building a relationship, because that's what networking is. It's never you just asking someone for something. It's always about that relationship you build and how you can sort of help and work with each other to kind of build both of you up a place where you want to be rather than just kind of constantly asking someone for lots of different things, because that's not a relationship. And that's probably why you're not going to be getting that response always if there's nothing coming back. You know what I mean?
Yeah, also just have friends. Like not in a nepotism kind of way, just make friends, go to jobs, make friends, be friendly, have fun. Once you click into that mindset, it starts becoming, I don't want to say second nature. It's always going to demand some work and effort, but it becomes more enjoyable, less tactical. Like it's not about tactics. We're not here to mind game this. It's people, and we like people, and we like working, and those things can all come together in a beautiful, even a beautiful way, even if you need to work for it a bit. It's hard to say it comes naturally.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. And I think the one thing you didn't necessarily touch on, but something that I really like about kind of freelancing is being able to manage my own time. Because I know it can
Uh,
be difficult in terms of planning in projects, but I love the fact that if I need to go to the shop, I don't have to wait until a lunch break or a structured like end of day. I can just go, oh, I've sent these emails. I'm just going to pop to the shop quickly, come back, and I'll finish what I'm doing later. And as long as you get kind of everything you need to do done, your time is your own, which is the big upside of managing your own time is that you don't have to work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. You can work when suits you and suits your projects, which I personally really enjoy. I think some other people might prefer that set structure, but I quite like being able to pick and choose when I work and what I work on.
I ironically like the structure, but at the day again, like it's you when you're as multidisciplinary as some people, you have to make those compromises. If I want to be jumping between jobs, then that's the compromise I need to have, which is why I didn't bring it up. But I will be going to the shop after this. It's in the schedule. Like I had to schedule it, but it's in the schedule to go to the shop.
I love that. And I think that's great though, because that kind of shows just between us very different approaches
Mhm,
to time management and how it is really, really personal, which
for
you
sure.
can use it to suit yourself. So this is another tricky question, but it's one we
Go
do
for it.
ask everyone. What is your favorite project that you've worked on and why?
Well, one singular project is gonna be hard. But my current favorite setup, I'd say, is when a director or a team has a really clear vision for what they want on their part, like for the actors and like the inspirations and references that a production uses, but then they let their designers go wild. Like again, you can give them the corrections or like course corrections rather than actual corrections is the best. But uh, when I do light and sound for a show like that, and I'm just given complete creative freedom to react to what the director and the actors are putting down, that's ideal situation for me because I get to have those little drops of like nuggets of references within the sound and lights to one another and then to the production itself or draw from whatever was given to me as an inspiration and like blow it up, make it bigger, make it unique in response to what is being done on stage. So yes, whenever there is a clear vision, creative freedom, and I get to do both because I get to have little cute interplays with myself and with the the cast and crew, but I get to make those choices. Yes.
Nice. I know exactly what you mean. That's great. I love that because I think it can be so hard to pick a project. Like everyone has struggled. So I think that kind of is really great in the sense that you've been able to pinpoint exactly what you like to work on. But that must also really help when it comes to you deciding what projects to take because you know that that's the setup you prefer and work best in. And if you have a show that's got really a different setup, that might really help your decision making. And I think it's a real kind of skill in itself to know that that's what you like to work in and how you like to work as well.
I think that as a freelancer, it's also really important to know when to pick the job you want versus the job you need, because sometimes you're gonna have to pick the job that's very prescriptive. I have to pick the job that's very prescriptive, very prescriptive, um, because that's what fits in my schedule, that's what fits to my current financial needs. But I can then go, okay, this is not gonna be that kind of project. We lock in on doing what needs to be done. It's again that kind of like I can do more but is this the kind of show that I should be doing that for, or should I be putting that extra energy into looking for my next gig? So it's managing what you want, what you need, what works with your current needs and wants.
Amazing. No, absolutely. And I mean, you've given us so much great advice in terms of freelancing and working across multiple disciplines. But just to round off, if you had one top final piece of advice to someone who is just starting out, who is considering doing this as their career, what would you say?
Ooh. Um, I'd say know your strengths, know your weaknesses, and play to your strengths. That's it. You need to know your weaknesses, but you don't need to overthink them. So know your strength, know your weaknesses, but play to the strengths. I think that's the core of it.
Nice. That's such a practical piece of advice. I love that. Thank you so, so, so much for coming and chatting to us this morning. I'm sure this has helped everyone who is watching. And if you do have further questions or things like that, please drop them in the comments and we'll be able to send them to Yuval. And I'm sure she'll be very happy to answer. But yes, you can watch all of our other coffee mornings on this playlist and on the channel. And if you have any questions for us as well, do drop us an email at floodartistdevelopment@gmail.com. But that is it for this morning, and we'll see you on the next coffee morning. Bye.